Welcome back to Crushing Comics Book Club, discussing Grant Morrison's Batman. Now, if you were with us for the last episode, you know we are deep in the throes of Final Crisis, and we're here to talk about the second half of Final Crisis, which is Final Crisis Resist and Submit, continuing through Batman 682 and 683, and Final Crisis 4 through 7. Now, because the Batman issues 682 and 683 are actually in the Grant Morrison Batman Omnibus, we're going to start our conversation by talking about them today. Then we're going to talk about all the other Final Crisis stuff, because I think ultimately you don't need Final Crisis to understand what's going on in these issues, and we will help you appreciate any little bits, little pieces of Final Crisis that you need. And then we'll talk about the rest of Final Crisis with just as much confusion and hopefully elucidation from Harry as we did in the last issue. So spoilers abound for all of Final Crisis, but we're trying to be very careful to not spoil anything ahead for the Batman read that you will be doing if you're following along in the Grant Morrison omnibuses or following along on DC Online. And also the note that we're doing every episode here is just a reminder that Grant Morrison really recently let everyone know that their pronouns are they, them. And we are going to do our best to honor that, as you would for anybody's pronouns or gender. And if we make a mistake, we're going to correct ourselves and move forward, as we hope you would as well. Let's begin here with Batman 682 and 683, which I have to say, I agitated to read these earlier before Final Crisis, even though they happen in the middle of Final Crisis, because even though the frame of them is that Batman has been captured, that's all you need to know. He's been captured by the forces of Darkseid. That's really the only setup. But they work so well for me in terms of everything that was happening in Batman R.I.P. with his self-reflection and what he's fighting with inside, and all the triggers built on top of capabilities, built on top of defenses that he's got internally to help make sure that he remains Batman. I think it works for like any plot where Batman is dying. I don't think you need Final Crisis to appreciate these issues. And that's why I personally advocated that we didn't have to read Final Crisis. I'm happy that I did now, but I'm just saying that you like don't feel some kind of way if you just want to read the Batman issues. They're going to work for you, I think. I don't know, Freya, you read them without reading all of Final Crisis. So do you think they worked and were interesting without reading all of Final Crisis?
These two issues were potentially the best comic issues ever.
Yeah,
like,
they're amazing.
I said that last time about
great.
another issue. I still said that last time about another issue. But now I want Grant Morrison to take every single character and summarize them, because this is what this is. Like, I really want, I'm like, can he do the X-Men Grand Design? That would be fantastic. But just take one character and then they're just saying their their life and stuff. But it was really good and it was really well done, and it also kind of shows what makes Batman, like what makes Bruce Wayne Batman. Sorry, what makes Bruce Wayne Batman, and then the the portrayal of Alfred here was on point, but even though it's not Alfred, it's like it's a construct of Alfred. A lot of these things is done so well, and it's actually gave you the fear that these memories are slipping away from him, and then he's being trying to put together. And then there's also some illustration where it's even though he's this Clark Kent looking doctor in this alternate universe, but the thing is people passing by are the people who are actually torturing him, so he's pushing back on it. And all the training and everything we have seen so far in the Nanda Parbat and all the other things are coming in play, to the point where I was thinking, why did we need all of the RIP before? Maybe we could have just done this instead. It's just, I don't know. It was so well done. I was obsessed with those two issues, and I read them twice.
Me too. Yeah.
I will, cards on the table, Peter. I definitely think this is something we could have included in earlier episodes. These two issues, they really do.
I tried, y'all. I tried to make them read it in RIP, but I think you need it in the middle of Final Crisis too, to be reminded why it's important to Batman. But anyway,
it's also it's just a remarkable thematic capstone to this first act of the story. So much of what is Bruce Wayne? What got him here? What's his relation mentally to Batman? It's exploring all of this. It's showing the history. It's weaponizing that history in the story, which is just such a Grant Morrison thing to do, but it's done so cleanly here, which I think we can appreciate, because Final Crisis is anything but clean. And this is something that we can all appreciate in the moment. And yeah, I disagree with y'all. These are just two just truly special issues that come off great after RAP. This is much more clear in its own Morrison way.
So a couple of things I do want to mention that if you're just reading the omnibus does a fantastic job of one-page summary of first 3 issues of Final Crisis that you don't actually need anything more than that. And it also does a fantastic job of summarizing 4 to 7 at the end of this. So you don't need anything more than that. But to other point, when you read these issues and you see how well this is done, that's what makes me, I know you said we're not going to say whether it's a like or hate. That's what makes me hate Final Crisis even more so, because you mofo, you already showed you can do this. So why are you doing that other weird way? I just don't get it.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about why I think they work so well, and then we'll get into some specific thematic aspects. I think if you had just done this right off the bat, or before RIP, or before any of these other things, you would think that Batman was at more risk from this process. But this, I think, quite deliberately mirrors the breakdown that happened in RIP with the whole Zornar Batman to show that you can't get past that bedrock safe reboot version of Batman. So you almost enter into this, and once you realize that they're trying to break down his psyche, you almost know it's going to fail, because Morrison is putting Batman through his paces. He's basically saying, well, look, we're attacking his whole concept of who he is as Bruce Wayne or Batman, or they said that starting in the very beginning, right? We've moved through that. Now we're into this, well, what happens if we try to kill them both? And we've said, well, psychically, he's got a version that will help him get back to goodness. And so now we're saying, well, let's now put him physically at risk in a way that's not just a fight, which is what's going to culminate in Final Crisis number 6. So I think it's really important that this is separated from Batman RIP, because you enter into it with the knowledge of whatever they're trying to do, it's probably not going to work. Yeah. And I think if you read this without RIP, or if this was before RIP, or whatever, you don't have that sureness, and I think it'll change how the story reads to you. But the other thing that's
it's almost like a delightful, it's almost delightful in a celebration of Batman after the darkness of RIP.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, because if you were just reading it in isolation, it would actually seem, I think, much darker, because they're stealing his memories, but actually
and substituting it.
Yeah, it's basically they're doing this thing where they're doing a play. It kind of reminds me of the Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, if you've ever seen that movie. They're playing one memory through, and they're tracking one thing in the memory, one person, one concept, one idea, and then they're replaying the memory, but almost painting that out with green so they can green screen it out. They're like, what happens if we paint out the bat? What happens if we paint out his parents dying? And they're just rerunning it again and again, because they're trying to almost do this experiment, right? It's like the scientific method. We're going to just keep using this control, which is Batman, and the variable is we're going to keep painting out one of these things, and we're going to test how he reacts until we kind of understand every part of him that's been influenced by every other part. And I think that would come off super dark if you had not just read the Zornar stuff, but instead you're like, fools, you cannot be, there's no underneath. It's turtles all the way down, you're never going to get underneath Batman.
It's super done well. I'm almost and to that point, as I'm saying that though, I was kind of wondering if I knew all the DC character the way I know Batman, would I have reacted differently to Final Crisis? Because this reads so much better.
Because I know Wonder Woman really well, and I do not like how Wonder Woman's used.
Oh no, I mean they don't know
Superman well, and he loves how Superman's used. So I think
the thing.
I always do.
Grant Morrison don't know how to write Wonder Woman. Let's just all agree on that. But the thing
that's going to make our Wonder Woman Earth 1 read that I'm going to enforce after this. Really exciting.
I never read that. I don't want to.
Right. Yeah, but the thing is, what I was saying though is because I know this history of Batman so well, as I'm going through this, it's all knowing. It's all I know these milestones, and I know what it meant to him and how he came out of it. So that's why it was easy to follow through. So that's why I'm saying that if he wrote Final Crisis as the final invasion in Marvel, I think I would have been all about it, because I know everything about them. So I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking about it.
This also relies really heavily on the prep reading we did. It references a ton of casebook. It references DC Detective Comics 27. It references Batman #1. And so, even though we're saying we know Batman so well, we know Batman so well, partially just over reading it in the past month, right. and Morrison deliberately gave us the keys to their car in specific when it comes to this. And I have read this before, and it did not seem as good to me as it did this time because I have all of the information now.
No,
and
but
this
the thing
book
is,
so cleanly. Yeah, go on.
No, I was just saying that this also referenced every single graphic novel that is very famous Batman stories that I've also read. Like, so.
And it's so cleanly doing this thing that they planned out, which is that, utilizing all of the history. It's showing that the Joker's personality is actively shifting and morphing. And it doesn't it touches on these things. It reminds you of what they've been establishing through this first act. While still being part of a crossover and still feeling light and kind of, badass. Like, I don't know how else to put it, but when you have clones that are clawing out their eyes because they can't handle the mental stress the Batman lives with, I don't know how else you describe that. It's great. It's like a feel good comic in the midst of all this disorienting nonsense that is Final Crisis.
And it also makes a good point about.
For a little while, I thought they were trying to swap him into Mudface. What's his name? The
lump.
The lump.
No. What is Clayface?
Clayface, but he is the lump.
It looks like.
I don't know. So it's different.
At the risk of basically just continuing to be effusive about these two Batman issues, we're going to dive back into Final Crisis now. And I think, everybody says, you got to at least read the Morrison stuff for Final Crisis. Read the Morrison stuff. Mm-hmm. I'm here with a different message for you, which is that I read Resist, which is by Greg Rucka. And even though it had some things that were very disorienting to me, I think I got more understanding of what was happening in Final Crisis from reading Resist than I did from reading any of Final Crisis.
Because
basically, Rucka is like, hey, there's Checkmate, which I've never read anything about and I don't know anything about, but they use Black Knights and White Knights. And I assume it's like the Hellfire Club, but for good guys. Don't tell me if I'm wrong. I'm just going to continue thinking that. Yes. And basically he's like, Checkmate is one of these many kind of extracurricular knows-it-all forces. And they had the wherewithal to basically not check their email the day the reply all of death was sent out. and so they're just operating with how do we keep ourselves alive long enough to have any kind of plan? And even though it's a very small personal story that's basically just about these few characters, it's Mr. Terrific, it's his one teleporter, and eventually it's also the cheetah. It also just makes really clear what's at stake here, that it's not quite a zombie invasion. It's not just this thing can be fought. It's Darkseid subverting everything that's true and real about Earth so that basically there's no possibility of having life because Darkseid is. And I think that reading this kind of is why I maybe enjoyed the second half a little bit more than the first half, because I feel like I kind of got it more than I got the first half. But I don't know. I might be the only one who read it out of all three of us. I just saw Rucka and I saw that it was part of Final Crisis. I was like, I'll read a Rucka issue. And then I was like, this is great.
So, I'll meet you halfway. I mean, I everything you just said, this is also why I like the second half more, because the themes become kind of more metaphysical. And anyway, this was a great comic. I've read half of Checkmate, so I enjoyed it. I got enough
Checkmate?
of
it seems really good based on
it's
that.
very good.
I loved
it's
it.
Very good. But we are already reading Checkmate in Twix. It's called Murders. So we don't.
There we go.
Oh wow! So it is the Hellfire Club. Excellent.
It is. No, I mean it's not but he did it first about the check and stuff, and then Dugan just copied it. So.
Well, good old copy and paste.
The Final Crisis tie-ins are mixed, I would say at best, but this is a really good one. And, it is nice to have a more down-to-earth showing of what these insane, fourth world stakes are on the ground. I kind of think it's better than the other book that Grant Morrison wrote, a tie-in that I'm sure we'll touch on.
Yes,
I don't feel like I needed this issue. I was just like, this is a good issue, and I liked it because I like Checkmate. I just think Ruck is a good writer. It's a good comic. People should read it.
I guess my point, if larger, is that the thing that Superman Beyond does for you, where it's a story about stories and it's kind of the galaxy brain take. This for me is kind of the pea-sized brain take. It's reduces down to the most personal thing that you can make it, so I can understand if it matters to anybody, right? And it does. And also, I just love Mr. Terrific. I think the past couple of years have led me to realize that Mr. Terrific actually maybe is my favorite DC character. So I just have that knowledge now. But then there's another kind of halftime issue, which is Final Crisis Submit. So first there's Resistance and then there's Submit, although there's a little bit of submission and a little bit of resistance in each one. And Submit, again, very personal, very self-contained. This one's by Morrison, and it has a self-contained story of how Black Lightning fails and falls to the forces of the anti-life because he decides to rescue a villain, the tattooed man, who ultimately becomes the key to them winning this whole thing in a way. But it's kind of like to show that even in the face of anti-life, you can still have optimism and still care about one human life, even if it's a life you've been told not to care about. And that will have an effect on everything. So again, in a story about stories, I found this very, very small, very personal story to be the key to me appreciating Final Crisis.
Well, it's that simplicity of just the inherent goodness of the superhero saving a villain and his family. It's really not that complicated a story, but just showing the inherent and the simple goodness of this contrasted to the overwhelming primal evil of Darkseid. Like, Morrison knows what they're doing here. Thematically, it's great. I just don't think as a comic it's incredibly entertaining, just like in terms of
not as entertaining as Resist, I'll tell you that.
This is for sure. No, so it's like I think it's good to read, and it makes sense, like, because Morrison's breaking down all these things into their primal components, their absolute forms. Is a huge part of the story. So I do think this kind of gives it more like metatextual power in that way.
So this is a problem that DC Comics has. DC Comics has for me. Anytime they try to show that, so being a hero is they just take it so darn seriously all the time that it makes it so boring and then so like, ugh, okay, sure, I get it. Versus something when Marvel does it, it actually feels more real. So is that the problem here? Like you were saying that it's boring and not entertaining.
It's more like it's just I kind of like, just very simply, I don't think the dialogue pops super well. It's just not like the most entertaining, especially for me. A lot of really good Morrison stories in this collection. It feels I feel like I'm kind of being a little hard on it. But yeah, it's very much Black Lightning being like, I have figured out my life. I know the right thing to do. I will do it no matter what. But that kind of rubs off on the tattooed man, which plays out in Final Crisis.
I'll give you a slant from that take, a slightly different take, which is that because the DC heroes that we've been told to care about the most are so iconic, when DC does a smaller character beat inside of a bigger thing like this, it's got to be done necessarily with a character like Black Lightning, who I love, but who like you almost definitely have less exposure to. It's like they can't replicate that moment with Superman. They just can't. Whereas in Marvel, you can slow down an event and have any number of characters that are really relatable, like Peter Parker or Miles Morales.
Spider-Man.
Right.
10 times.
And have that moment. And so it's like the difference is that with Marvel, sometimes it's hard to make things seem big enough when you have Captain America and Wolverine at the center, who are just normal dudes in the scope of things, right? Marvel doesn't have a lot of like Superman, Wonder Woman level heroes in play at most times, other than Thor. But then on the DC side, it's like, how do you make that huge scoped thing hit when you're using all these iconic characters, and when the smaller ones you pull out, some people maybe have never even heard of before. So I just think it's like that's like the cosmic scales between Marvel and DC. That the DC events are always struggling to make it more personal. The Marvel events are always struggling to make it seem more epic. And to me, that's the difference.
I like that read. I think that makes a lot of sense. I just like, from a pure craft standpoint, I was not blown away by the issue. I just appreciated it for what it's trying to do thematically.
Well, speaking about thematic appreciation, there are two things that I critically missed in the back half of this that are really important. So I want Harry was like in our document. There's a note that's like, "Come on, Peter." Harry.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about these two things because I'm not going to get them right. So here's the first thing. I get that monitors oversee time. And I get that the monitors are corrupted as part of this, and there's a whole monitor vampire thing happening after Superman Bond. But at no point in the actual Final Crisis issues did I understand that like time was collapsing on top of this anti-life thing and fragmenting and folding it in itself and becoming funny until they basically said it on panel in Final Crisis 7. And I was like, WTF, that has not been happening. And then Harry's like, Peter, come on. Are you paying any attention at all? So Harry, explain to our dear listeners, how are we supposed to know that space-time and reality have been fragmenting for 3 issues? What did I miss?
The tell for me.
Before Harry said, is it because of the world being funneled down? Is that
a part of it? No.
That's how we're supposed to know that there was like a multiple world being funneled down?
Because they're in a funnel? Harry, help me. You're my only hope.
You guys are really putting a lot on me right now. All right, so my read was
Do we
always
need a
like,
data page for this?
so
Data pages would have definitely helped Final
that
Crisis.
actually would have helped a huge. Okay, so my read of the series is always, and why I like it so much, and this is my personal read, because again, this is an incredibly disorienting comic. I read that as a choice on Morrison's part. And I think you see that start to happen more when in the 4th issue, Darkseid kind of fully assumes the body of Dan Turpin. Dan Turpin does the thumbs down and says, give in. And Darkseid is basically made fully manifest. And when that happens, just him existing starts to kill some of his people around him. Like
I didn't.
My read is
now
always,
that you say it, I'm like,
Yeah.
of course it did, but
Yes.
I completely missed that.
Yeah, him becoming physical and real is starting to shatter reality and rework it in his image and his design. Now, this is shown in the comic by becoming more confusing. Then you also have, which again, totally get why someone wouldn't like that. Saying it out loud sounds crazy. But like, then you have the Green Lanterns, which are basically trying to get to Earth, but time space has been so distorted. They are just traveling and not even getting there because things are just happening by this new God presence, this evil God presence on Earth. So that by the time
I got that, but I think I was having trouble connecting the two. Like, so the core of the, is it Hal, Kyle and Guy are coming back from being on Oa because they basically, it was like this trial of Hal Jordan is a sham. The Alpha Lanterns have been infiltrated. We covered this in the first half. And so they use as much lantern power as they can to get to the Earth's gravitational field. And then they're like, we're just going to free fall in so we don't blow the rest of our lantern power. But it turns into this game of like having infinity. They can't get close enough to Earth. But I guess I didn't understand that that's specifically related to Darkseid totally taking over Turpin. And now that you say it, I'm like, oh, but now there's the other thing that you had to school me on. I don't know that I understood the moral struggle of Darkseid eventually becoming Dick Turpin, who's our overweight investigator, Harvey Bullock stand-in, because I just didn't think he was that significant. So then when Darkseid uses him and when he struggles against Darkseid and Darkseid finally wins, I feel like it was kind of lost on me because I didn't understand that it was important. So to share the ballad of Dick Turpin with the ballad, because I did not get that at all. And I think that was contributing to why I was so confused.
He's just like, I mean, my read of all of it, I looked it up, I mean, he's been a Superman character. He's just a good guy figure. And the fact that Darkseid he's fighting on the side of the angels, even though he's kind of like this hard ass noir guy. He's trying to make the world a better place. But like the point, like Darkseid, the submission, the giving in, the thumbs down, that is the moment that kind of unlocks the world shattering things that happen further, because this is an evil god existing and starting to just change the entire world around him if we were done. But you start to get to like black, red skies with black lightning and like humanity all possessed as once, like just really insane, like world shaping and reworking things start happening at this point, which I always like to read it as just these larger than reality figures, these gods transforming the DC universe. That's just kind of like the stakes that we're on. It's a very messy. So totally up for interpretation, totally up for like maybe reading things differently. That's just always been mine.
So not having read Final Crisis 4, but knowing that is the fate of that Dick Turpin character, and the fact that this is all about stories and stories, could be possible that he's an outdated character who has no more reason to exist, and Darkseid took over him because he has some very outdated mentality in the very first couple, all his lines, all the dialogues or all the monologues that he was having was very it's like a version of good guys back in 50s, which are like, no, you ain't, you're not.
I think you're onto something there, because there's a point where Superman says, you took over Turpin, and he's like, well, Batman, and Darkseid said, well, Batman would have struggled longer than I would have wanted, kind of almost implying Turpin is more human and has flaws and is weaker in that sense, even if he's trying in his own way to do the right thing. I've got a more positive read on this character clearly, but I definitely think you're onto something there.
And also, now that we're kind of opening this up, I do kind of see it as Darkseid didn't need to pick somebody. He was originally Darkseid. See, I always say Darkseid. Darkseid originally was in the club owner, but you get the sense that was a bad person to begin with, and he can't quite take over Batman. They're moral opposites. And so actually it's more interesting for him to occupy somebody who's more like moral centrist.
Could go either way. Yeah.
To basically say like, all I've got to do is basically swing the swing voters. I basically got to say, can this anti-life equation start the tide by convincing the people in the middle to kind of give up on morality? Because that will be enough to say that, you know, the way that they go, everybody will go. Is that a thing?
I think that's a great idea. Yeah. And it's like, it kind of gives Turpin more agency of like, you have a choice to make here. And the fact that the choice goes bad, it goes to night, is just like such a pure, simple thing that's contrasted all of this messy craziness around us.
Well, the other thing that's happening here, I think this is by far the most interesting plot beat happening in 4 and 5, now that I understand what was happening. But the other things happening in 4 and 5 is basically, we're just seeing the little pockets of resistance. We've got the checkmate people, we have a few people in various Justice League towers, and they're kind of moving around. There's the Hall of Justice, and we're basically just seeing the resistance. And it's like, these are those middle chapters that are like, things are grim. Like that's all that's really happening. There are some interesting interactions happening kind of in the middle. We see that Wonder Woman is now fully leading the Furies on the behalf of Darkseid. We see that nobody really wants to trust Tattoo Man, but the Ray kind of gets it. And so they're trying to kind of like argue with these much more established heroes like Green Arrow and Black Canary. And Green Arrow eventually sacrifices himself because he comes around, which I think is an interesting comment from Morrison, kind of distinguishing these different heroes. And Morrison's very much playing on the like 70s interpretation of Green Arrow, Green Lantern here by using Green Arrow and Green Lantern to come and save all of these Silver Age people who have been waylaid, corrupted, taken off the board. He's like, even though these are also Silver Age heroes, they're the vanguard of the Bronze Age, and I can use them in ways that are surprisingly moral because that's who they are in the history of DC stories. See, I'm a smart one too. I see themes. I know themes.
It's a great thing. It's a great, like, and it's a little bit of humanity in the story that could use some. It's really, Green Arrow comes off really great in this book. And I loved hearing all that.
Even though Green Arrow eventually gets anti-lifed, but it doesn't matter because Green Arrow, through volunteering to be anti-lifed, sets off the chain of events that ultimately will result in the heroes winning.
You looked so satisfied.
I was extremely satisfied.
I know, you look so sad. I was like, I'm smart too, you know?
Well, I think,
We're
my
smart.
first read, I don't think I was focused on it being a story about stories. And I've been talking to Harry all week about this to try to get ready for this. And the more I understand that it's a story about stories, the more I'm seeing resonance. Again, to Freya's earlier point, that's bullshit if you have to talk to Harry that much to enjoy a story.
Yeah.
Nobody should have to talk to Harry that much.
I'm the loser who's like, it's not a bug, it's a feature. I totally get that's a very contrarian thing. I totally get like, no, this bad thing that made you angry, I like it. I think the biggest issue,
No, I was just going to say, like, it's always been my pet peeve, like from my school days and stuff. It's like, oh, you have to read this textbook, but you also have to read this textbook companion to understand it. Well, no.
Put it in the damn textbook.
Put it in the damn textbook. So
it's bonkers. This is their summer events. I still can't believe that they were just like, every book ties into Final Crisis.
Well, and also playing with that generational nature is also there's this distrust of Shiloh Norman. Like Shiloh Norman, Mr. Miracle, is like, I also have a plan that's going to be, they've kind of all come across this symbol of life, Tattooed Man and Shiloh come across it in different ways. And again, he encounters a different group of hold-up heroes who also don't trust him. So there's definitely this generational thing that also plays out a little bit from the Black Glove arc, and that will continue to play out in Morrison in the next arc that we read. So we get to the end of Final Crisis number 5, and all the stuff that we just said happened, right? Darkseid takes over. We get the thumbs down, which I have to say is a utterly gorgeous panel.
It's so good.
And so now we're in the end game in Final Crisis number 6 and Final Crisis number 7. And Final Crisis number 6, we got to spend some time on because this is the only one that really truly matters to the Batman read.
Yeah.
Which is Batman through what happened in Last Rites, breaks out of his problems. And he's like, Darkseid, you D-bag, I'm going to take you, see, Darkseid, I can't say Darkseid, is going to take you down. And so they fire at the same time. Batman, in this hilarious moment, like Batman says, I don't use guns, but I'm going to make an exception for you. And so Batman fires the gun, Darkseid fires his I-beams, and they take each other out, leaving us with a desiccated husk. Batman died! Oh no!
Oh my God!
What does the omnibus end? What will happen?
No more Batman comics. We're done.
I have so much question. This is one thing I read though. So I have like,
Right.
I have question. And my question is, and this is one of the reasons I hate it when, characters are settled with one characteristics that makes them like, oh my God, this is like the one characteristic. They're never going to break that. And this is what's going to make them. So his whole thing is he doesn't kill. Even though we have seen that's not necessarily how he started, but that's how it became the thing. So now, and all these years, like, oh, we're not going to do it because we're going to try to, like, he's going to solve problems other way. This is what Batman is. Like, he's going to solve problems by not killing, by being smart about it and stuff like that. And here we are. He did the one thing that he said that he's never going to do and solve the problem. How is that? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing?
I've got some thoughts that Harry's got to go first.
How am I supposed to feel about this? Because this is one of the reasons I really hated that they all got settled with no kill, only because if these people started killing, there will be no bad guys for them. Like they cannot, it's a DC it's a problem. So how am I supposed to think? Yeah, how am I supposed to feel about this?
Uh-huh. All right. So about him shooting Darkseid, I don't have a full feeling on like how like the morality of that plays in. You can make the case that when you are facing like a reality shattering.
No, it's not about moral because I'm all for killing people.
But it is.
So
it's superheroes. Superheroes are pretty
remember, as the leader
moral.
of the Sisterhood of Evil Mutants. Let's
not. But like,
and
this is also a story about morality. It's about good versus evil. So that's like a thing. And we're playing in like a kid's universe where like superheroes don't kill because that's just more appealing to children. Point is I don't know, or it's a good lesson to give kids. Don't kill. So like Batman's breaking his rule and he is immediately punished for it by getting the laser blast to the face. So I think that's a story saying that even though this in Batman's mind, this was necessary, there is a price to pay. And yet, I mean, you just have to accept the fact, like in this scene, Batman does not kill. He finds that reprehensible. He's in this an absolute good facing the absolute evil, the god of evil that is wrecking reality. So this is a very primal thing that to me is almost an echo or repeat of Superman's absolute conflict and Beyond, where he's assuming that absolute form and fighting Mandrake. And so the reason why I think this scene is very important to the second act of Batman. We've all been talking about this. I've been dragging Peter on for like 2 months at this point, but basically, this Final Crisis is a book about these heroes getting involved with primal, like beyond their even ideas of comprehension gods and being sucked into these bigger stories and how that is literally shaping reality around them. This is a story about stories affecting each other, about things changing. And this is where Batman enters thematically a different ball game. The first act of this book has been, what is Batman? What is Bruce Wayne? Bruce Wayne is trying to become the ultimate man, the ultimate, like the peak of like, humanity essentially. And then it's there that he fights, the ultimate evil here being Darkseid. And, this is about like stories, these new gods like affecting these human characters and almost shifting them. I would almost say, and we'll get into it more later, but I talked about it in the RIP episode, that right before Dr. Hurt crashed his helicopter, because Batman rejected him, he said, the next time you wear your cape and cowl will be your last. Which on one hand could be just random supervillain banter or like yelling. But the fact that you lead right into this book, which is about stories and reality being shifted, that you can almost view what Dr. Hurt said to be something with a lot more substance and threat behind it. And that's all I'm going to say about that for now. But this is just Batman on a different wavelength, on a different level of conflict and being changed by that. And I think we're going to see that change in the second act and of their Batman run.
And I think I look at this in two different levels. I love this Batman scene. I remember it fondly from the first time. I think this is the only scene people should read in Final Crisis if they're doing a Grant Morrison Batman read, because I think it's brilliant. And here's why. I think it operates, and I differ a little bit from Harry on this.
Mm-hmm.
I think on one level, it operates on Morrison doing the kooky thing. It's like a very Silver Age moment of Batman being like, well, none of my normal methods worked. So I have this cosmic gun that shoots special time bullets. It's not a normal gun, you know? And like,
it's a good gun.
Like it's almost like deliberately silly in Silver Age, almost like current Batman can't solve this through logic. We have to break current Batman in order to solve it, not with logic. But Morrison, they are doing something different on another level that actually has the same moral outcome underneath of it, which is saying DC and superhero events such as they have been built to a point that it forces everything good to become bad. That's how they're built. Like they're built to have these characters act in these tragic ways because that's the only way to get to the crest, to get to the climax, to get to the crisis, to the decision point, is you have to break something. Because it's almost like this mystery box storytelling. If everybody just acts totally in character, then we couldn't shock you and thrill you. So Morrison has basically said, well, what's the one thing that Batman doesn't do? He doesn't use guns and he doesn't kill. So that's how we're going to resolve this. And to Harry's point, we're going to specifically punish Batman for doing that. But the other thing that made me realize that was earlier in the issue, Tawny, who is just this very friendly tiger buddy of the Marvel family, eviscerates Calabac. Like graphically,
wrecks him.
Just totally tears his guts out. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And Tawny is such a lovable, huggable tiger. And in that moment, in my notes, I wrote, everything good is ruined. And I think that in Final Crisis 6, Morrison is playing with the idea that everything good must be ruined. And that's how you expect these events to end, right? Then in Final Crisis 7, which we can start moving forward to, Morrison says, but wait, maybe it's not that everything good is ruined, because Final Crisis 7 basically has Superman singing in order to save the day. I mean, we have come all the way 180 from Batman murdering people to Superman humming a little ditty and saving the day. And I think so it's Morrison kind of deconstructing the idea of a superhero event and then reconstructing that, like, there are other ways to do this that are actually true to the characters. So Superman gets everything that he wants. Lois is alive. He comes out fine. Batman loses everything that he wants. He dies. And he's going to have to go through a trial before you get to enjoy him again.
I love that a lot. Yeah, that's a great read. And the final issue it just goes full incomprehensibility, because this is
it is incomprehensible.
Yeah, it is, but again, it is a choice. It's not a failure. It is not a error. It is a choice that Grant Morrison is making. You can decide if you like that or not. Either is totally valid.
I'm going to use that from now on for every Hickman issue. Like, it is a choice.
Hickman makes lots of choices. That's totally valid for him.
No, it's all a choice. So
it's this issue where, it's very clearly the story about stories. It's told in like a completely fragmented manner, where Supergirl is telling the stories of how they defeated Darkseid. They're all on this like watchtower, like life raft, while reality has like folded in on itself. It's just all fading away. It's like the last moments before heat death. This whole like, it's just like this total like arc it is an arc. It's literally an arc. And basically Superman, he goes to the future and talks with Brainiac 5. I'm trying to remember. He goes to Brainiac 5 and he remembers the miracle machine. He remembers the schematics and reworks it so that he can create a wish. This is all like a Deus Machina kind of thing. It's very simple. As you said already.
But the funny thing is, it can't be a Deus Ex Machina because it was actually introduced early. Like, the whole point of Deus Ex Machina is the God machine at the end comes in and fixes everything. But Morrison turned that on his head because in the middle, he's like, by the way, there's going to be a God machine that comes in and fixes everything, which makes it not a God machine. Anyway,
there you go.
That makes it a Chekhov's gun.
Right. That's the whole point. He named it the God machine, but he said, actually, it's Chekhov's gun. He's saying the idea of, or they are saying the idea of a Deus Ex Machina in a comic book is already expected. It's a Chekhov's gun. We know it's going to go off. So it's not actually a Deus Ex Machina because you already know about it.
And we're skipping over a lot of just great like superhero moments where
and terrible ones.
And some terrible ones, but like where Darkseid controls the entirety of the human race and is like kind of manifesting them into like his own will, and stuff where like Lex Luthor and Superman team up for like the first time, or that kind of like, those are some solid blockbuster moments in a book that has not been super interested in delivering on them. But anyway, point is, Superman's putting together the wish machine, and the basic essence, there's this primal like fourth world design creation of Darkseid is closing in on him, and basically he's going to use the mother box for his own design. But what Superman Beyond did a lot, and it's kind of like explored here too also, is that, you know, the multiverse that they've been traveling through, the ultimate tool, the submarine, is like they're picking up different wavelengths and frequencies, and this whole thing of basically like, you know, the multiverse maybe, or just life itself in contrast with Darkseid, is based on music, on wavelengths, on things of that nature. That's always been my read. So then Superman kind of does a thing where he, you know, he is doing the exact opposite of this death god that is Darkseid, and he defeats him by singing the exact counter vibration that will destroy or disperse his essence. I think this all rules. And then he uses the wish machine to, well, he wants to put everything back to normal, but then he runs into Mandrak, which must have been super disorienting for people who had not read this. But basically, I mean, my read of this is always
it's super disorienting to me. I read
it. But it's like everything's gone. The entire multiverse has, or this universe has faded and cracked, and it's folding on itself. There is nothing left. And because there is nothing left, this is where Mandrak is. He is just this primal fixture above stories. He's been beyond it. And now that almost everything else is gone, he remains here. And basically nicks Yuotan.
Yeah, Mandrak is like the ultimate hate reader, right? Like Darkseid could have won, and Mandrak would have just kept hate reading that continuity and getting his vampire energy, just like me with a Jonathan Hickman comic. But no, since the comic got canceled, Mandrak has now been so filled with hate energy, like a giant buzzard that's, you know, filled up on carrion. He's now going to come in and delight in that, much like I do after a Hickman comic is canceled. So I really see myself in Mandrak, is what I'm saying.
There's a primalness to this. There's like he is the boss after the boss. He's just there. Darkseid's within the story, and Mandrak
he's external
is outside.
Yeah.
Yes, and
they still have to fight him. He's DC editorial, and they've got to slay him.
But they do it in a fun way where they bring in this multiverse of Superman, which is again just the primal superhero, the most fundamental figure to fight this primal evil, and then also the Green Lanterns finally show up after all the time shenanigans, and it's good to have a bunch of light superheroes to kill a vampire. And also, I think that's all pretty great.
I have to point out.
This is Secret Wars.
This
is multiple man, and
Hickman takes a lot from Grant Morrison.
And trims off of Morrison hard.
And done it so well that I understood all of the thing. I didn't have to not understand any of this.
You could call Secret Wars more banal, but I wouldn't take it there.
So I mean,
it could be. It is. I'm not saying it's not.
So we've kind of skipped over the Flash's stuff a little, maybe just because we're not as well versed in Flash, but it almost absolves Batman a little bit to say that Batman was only ever shooting to wound, and he probably understood that because he's Batman, that he's just repurposing this bullet that goes through time, and anything that goes through time comes with the consequences of being through time. And so by shooting Darkseid with it, he kind of marks Darkseid for the same kind of reaping what he sowed that he marked Orion with, and thus the Flashes lead the Black Racer to Darkseid. Now, Darkseid, could Batman have anticipated all that? We'll never know, or maybe we will. I don't recall. But it kind of absolves him because Batman was never killing Darkseid. Batman was telling Darkseid. He was putting the laser pointer on her and saying, "Here, get him," and then Black Racer arrives. So that's one thing that I think we can't totally miss out on. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is that Wonder Woman. So I love Wonder Woman, and I probably know her the best out of almost any hero outside of an X-Men. Her arc here is really disappointing, and Morrison's definitely doing some very troubling things with the way he deliberately takes women off of the board, and some of the Supergirl and Mary Marvel stuff we will not repeat on this program. It's despicable, and I think it's the reason that it's one of the many reasons I would say skip this event. But he does, or they do, kind of have Wonder Woman more or less save herself here. Like, it seems like there's going to be a big moment of conflict between Wonder Woman as the leader of the Furies and Superman. But the way that I read it, and maybe I'm forgetting, is that Wonder Woman basically just says, I have the power of love. This is all bullshit. Basically, Wonder Woman realizes the truth of who she is, which I think is very consistent with the way that Morrison continues to use Wonder Woman, times that they have returned to Wonder Woman. So she does kind of become self-saving princess, which is fun. But I do think some despicable things have been done that making her a self-saving princess does not necessarily absolve.
You told me not to even read the book because you
Free would have rage quit this program.
Morrison
you didn't want me to walk out of the show.
This is the part that aged the worst. Morrison's trying to play up the depravity of like the evil god Desaad and just like the grossness of that character, but they do it in a very familiar and disappointing way. And I have no reason to just defend that. It wasn't good. It aged very poorly. So I'm glad you didn't read it, Freya.
So
stay with us on this crazy ride.
No. If I did read that, I would have ended my friendship with you.
Yeah, I mean, I knew because I've read it before that when I got to that part to just like start turning pages. So
I forgot, and you told me, I was like, right. Dang.
Right.
So
no, especially knowingly putting me through that, I do not forgive people for those.
Thanks.
So look, we've reached the end of Final Crisis. Batman's dead, and that's what really matters for our next issue. Because guess what? We don't care what happens to any of these other heroes.
But is he though?
Is he though? But we don't care about any of these other heroes because we're not reading the rest of what's happened to them. We're reading the rest of Batman. But here's the thing: we've made it through all of this, and I keep saying, we're not going to say if it's good or bad. We're not going to say it's good or bad, although Freya has decided to occasionally break that ruling. I now want to just unvarnished, full spoilers, because we made it to the end. How do you really feel about Final Crisis? We'll start with Harry, and then we'll have Freya, and then we have for me. So Harry, personal feelings, remove all the interpretations. How does it make you feel?
On this read, it is striking how much of it is both confined by its event comic kind of structure and storytelling choices, but also trying to comment and satirize on them. It's hard for me to be critical about this because it is a book that I have read multiple times, like for years and years and years. To be clear though, this is not my favorite part of Morrison's run, of the Bat run. And even from a plot standpoint, it is not as integral as I said earlier, but it is something that thematically is introducing things, particularly with that scene in Final Crisis 6 with Batman, that I do think, I hope for you, Peter, that you can appreciate the second act more with just the themes, because the things that Morrison kind of introduces in Final Crisis, just the thematic ideas of stories and how they shift and shape, that does continue throughout the second act. That's always been my read. So anyway, long story short, I'm glad I read it. I do enjoy it. I do. The Mary Marvel stuff leaves a really bad taste in my mouth, and I forgot about it until now. And I'm a different reader at this point. But I'm still incredibly fond of this book because it's just so off the wall, and it's just been a really important part of my comic experience.
Freya, would you like to add any unvarnished thoughts of yours?
I mean, I quit reading after issue 3. I was like, life's too short. I'm not going to bother with this, whatever. And the thing is, like, I will say, though, any story that requires multiple reading or it requires multiple other sources that you have to check in order for you to enjoy and appreciate it, it's an automatic 0 for me because it should never have to be done that way.
Yeah, the funny thing is,
not.
I just watched a movie in theaters that like annoyed me so much that like it required so much backstory from like movies from 10 or 15 years ago. And like, I just didn't bring it to this comic, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
Like, it doesn't have to be like, I'm not saying, no, and I'm not saying that, oh, if it's a sequel, like you don't have to read. No, I'm not saying that, like stories are chapters and stuff, but I'm saying that the same story should not have to have a companion guide written by others so that you can understand it. And to me, that's an automatic fail. I'm like, it just is. And I have to have some level of understanding of it. And this just didn't have that. Now, if I knew DC World, would I have a different experience? Maybe. So maybe it's just my thing, but I'm not. And the thing is, most of the time when I hear Peter talk about a story, I feel like I want to go back. This is the first time even Peter didn't convince me to go back.
Dang.
Well, and it could be that I'm
failure of the story, not of Peter.
Well, and it could be that I'm not a good enough actor, much like Batman trying to be Bruce Wayne, because I've tried to be kind of balanced as the moderator through this, but I hate this comic so much that hopefully I shielded you from that a little bit by talking about my confusion, which was real.
That was good.
But, I read this 10 years ago and hated it. And I think around this time, my Batman run reading started to break down when I did it. And maybe that's why I don't remember anything that happened after this. And so I came to it again, and I came to it like I've been a comic book reader every month for 10 years. I've read all of DC for at least 5 years. I've read tens of thousands of comic books. I've read Final Crisis guides. I have the perfected reading order. I read it all in order. I'm reading all, like, I've done everything right, okay? And I have Harry, who has like this personal connection at basically on call to pick up the phone for me whenever I get confused. And I hated it more this time than I hated it last time, because even after doing all these things, like Freya said, I did everything that everybody said I should do, because there's so many people out there who love Final Crisis, and it just doesn't work. It's not a good story. It's not entertaining. None of it's interesting. I just think it's bad. But here's the thing. Me thinking it's bad does not take away you loving it. It doesn't take away the things you got from it. It doesn't take away the things I got from it in this discussion. It's an important point to me that we have to learn how to separate our critical responses as people who are truly reading critically for themes with comic books as literature from our personal critical responses of good or bad. Because you know what? I think this is a trash fire of a comic book, and yet as a critical reader, I found a lot of really interesting things to discuss and debate about it. And that's why I do all these shows and spend all this time in this YouTube channel, because it's a lot more interesting to talk about these things from that perspective than to just thumbs up, thumbs down, like we're as basic as Darkseid. So my message to you is, like, it kind of doesn't matter if you loved it or didn't love it. What I hope you got from it is that there's some interesting themes. And if you find the interesting themes, and if we helped you get there, or we reminded of them, or you already knew them, and you still think it's bad, more power to you. Because you know what? So do I. And I will never in my life read a single page of this comic book ever again.
I will say, if you guys had said that you love this book, I would have felt like my reality was breaking down. I would have just been like, what is happening?
Oh, have you seen our X-Core 2? Big X-Core 2? Because you weren't on it. Because that's when my reality broke. When Peter said that he loved it. I'm like, Peter was written by Hickman that week. Because character.
I saw Peter's messages about X-Corp in the group chat, and I was like, I'm not even gonna think about this right now. Like, I can't even begin to understand why Peter likes this comic.
So I know that feeling.
You know, I will say it was a great discussion, and I'm glad you guys tried it out. I'm really glad you guys took the plunge on this one. Even Frio did what you could. Like, that was nice of y'all.
Yeah, and I think, to bring this all the way back to what we said at the beginning, we weren't here to tell you if it was good or bad, although we just did. But I mean, the majority of the discussion was not that. We're here to try to let you know if you should be able to skip it or not. And we're going to find out in the coming weeks, because Faria did skip more than half of it. I wish I had, but I read it. And Harry's already read it before. So we will now have this perspective to carry through to us. And Harry sometimes is going to say, oh, this is a theme from Final Crisis. And I'm going to say, I didn't see that because I ignored it. And Faria's going to say, I didn't see that because I didn't read it. So now it's like we've split across 3 different realities as readers. And that is the reality that you will get for us moving forward through the rest of this Grant Morrison read.
I love comics. Comics are the best.
We're going to read Batman and Robin 1 through 6, but who could possibly that be about? Batman just died. Whatever shall we do?
Are we just forgetting the ending of this friggin' book is Batman in a cave? Are we just going to pretend like we're not even gonna... Yeah.
Well, there you go. So, Freya, why do we get together and read anymore. Batman?
We've lost the thread.
I don't know. This week, I don't know.
Possibly put Harry on trial. I don't know.
The trial of Harry.
The trial of Harry coming this September.
Yeah, I don't know anymore. Who cares? Let's move on.
I think reading Batman is like firing a bullet backwards through time. And the more that we appreciate Batman now in the present means that in some version of our past selves, they might appreciate Batman more as well, which gives a whole new meaning to the saying. See you next time. Same bat time, same bat channel.
Don't give it to the people. Don't give it to
the... It happened.
Goodbye. I'll see you next time on Crushing Comics Book Club.
I love that we did it for the episode that's not about Batman.
Never again.
All right, guys.
All right, y'all.